Good morning, GCC kids!
Our story is brought to you today by our sponsor, Flour. Flour. Enjoy the taste of the fields every time you bake. More from them later.
Let's talk about the story of a famous woman in the Bible, Ruth. Not root, not truth. Ruth. We find the story of Ruth in the 8th book of the Bible. Guess what it's entitled? You can already guess. Ruth. Up to this point in the Bible, stories have been huge, gigantic, epic tales spanning books, spanning the entire Bible. But Ruth takes a turn and instead tells us this tiny little short story. Ruth lets us zoom directly into this tiny little story of this family and how Ruth played a part in that family. It all starts out with this guy named Elimelech. What a fascinating name. Elimelech was a follower of God who was married to another follower of God named Naomi. Naomi and Elimelech had 2 sons, and both of them needed to get married. But the 2 of them decided not to marry Israelites. Nope, they decided to marry 2 Moabites. And get this, the first one, her name was Orpah.
That name is so hard to read. When you look at it, I mean, the letters are so close to one of my favorite talk show hosts of all time, Oprah, and they're also when you pronounce it, it sounds so much like orca. And I've been to SeaWorld. I love marine life. It's just a beautiful animal.
And the other lady who was married to one of Naomi's sons, her name was Ruth.
See, now that name isn't as weird. Again, no offense to all the people out there who their mom and dad named them Orpha. I just wanted to go ahead and point out, I think Ruth is less weird than Orpha.
Are you done?
Yeah, I guess I'm done. Yeah.
Eventually, Elimelech dies, which means that Naomi had no husband. And then,
You won't believe this.
Naomi's 2 sons, they died as well. So now it's just Naomi and these 2 wives who, again, were not Israelites. In terms of their families, they had no direct connection to God. At this point, Naomi turns to Ruth and Orpah basically and says, you guys are totally free to go if you want to. Like, no obligation to stay in this house if you want to. I totally get it if you want to leave. Be blessed. But they kept following her as she was walking away. She tells them, with tears welling up in her eyes, no, really, you can go. So they all cling to each other and they're having a big old cry together. Orpah kisses her goodbye and she walks away. But Ruth clung to her. Ruth's standing there like, nope, you are going to have to peel me off of you. And Naomi just tells her straight up, look, you should go back and be with your people. They would be happy, you would be happy. It's what you should do. But then, Ruth says this famous line, where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. Ruth really shows devotion to Naomi's family by clinging to her and not letting her go. In fact, Ruth staying with Naomi shows mad respect for Naomi's family. Ruth is devoting her future marriage to Naomi's family and all of the blessings and all of the good things that come as a result of getting married. So at this point, Ruth and Naomi put their heads together and they start coming up with a plan. Their plan revolves around setting Ruth up with the farmer hottie Boaz. Evidently, Ruth didn't look too bad herself because the plan works flawlessly. Ruth walks out onto the field and begins to pick up the extra grain, and this is when Boaz turns to his head farmhand and says, whoa, who does that young woman belong to? And then he marches on up to her and he says, here, you take a whole bunch of stuff because I'm going to take care of you. But he also mentions how much of a sacrifice he knows that Ruth has made for Naomi's family while Orpah had to go and bug out of there.
There's that name again.
So Boaz and Ruth continue to flirt until Ruth is able to rush on home and tell Naomi all the good juicy gossip about how awesome her new bae is. Isn't this kind of playing out like a sweet Bible rom-com that you really want to watch?
And now, a word from our sponsors. Tired of your boring sandwich without anything to hold it together? Do you often feel as though nutrition is missing from your life? Introducing flour. Flour is a cheap and wonderful ingredient that people have been using since Bible times, and we still use it today. Every time you enjoy a nice piece of bread, remember, flour brought you that bread. How do you make flour? Well, you take wheat and you thresh it into flour. Flour. Enjoy some today. Ask your parents' permission before consuming it or making bread. Good luck finding it in the supermarket right now. Also, flour is hard to make, so ask your doctor if flour is right for you.
So Ruth goes to meet Boaz in his threshing floor.
That's where they make the flour. I don't know if you knew that or not, but
Yeah, I'm sure they've seen the commercial for it. And then they got to hang out, and after they hung out, Boaz gave her a ton of barley to give back to her and Naomi. But after this, Boaz marches on down to the city gate, and he sits down with all the other elders. Oh yeah, it's serious business time. He says to the elders, "I want to marry Ruth." And all the elders say,
sure, go for it.
So Boaz married Ruth and continued to allow Naomi's family to thrive. Because Ruth was true and faithful to Naomi and her family, she enabled Naomi to continue to be blessed even into her old age. But the really cool thing is that Ruth's small story of faith impacts the entire biblical story of faith. See, while we were zooming in on this story, if we zoom out a little bit, we realize that this story impacts the biblical story. That's right, it impacts the story that has to do with King David. You see, Boaz and Ruth would give birth to Obed, which is another funny name. Obed would give birth to Jesse. Jesse would give birth to someone you've definitely heard of before. King David.
Now, whoa there, don't get ahead of yourself. You want to talk about that in a couple of weeks, so just be careful there. I mean,
Fair enough. Ruth's short story in the Bible reminds us to live faithfully and with respect for everyone else around us. This means that we're always looking for ways to help attend to the needs of the people around us, instead of just focusing on ourselves. Now, what does that mean or look like? It basically just means this. Don't always think just of what you can get out of other people. Instead, think about what you can do for other people. Ruth didn't have to help Naomi, but because she showed so much respect to Naomi and her family, it was taken as a faithful act, and it made God be faithful to her family as well, as they became the Davidic family. Hey, you know, at the beginning of this video, I wasn't very respectful to you, and I just wanted to say I'm really sorry.
Oh, well, that's okay. Thanks so much for saying that. I mean, you know, the other day, I just want to tell you this real quick. I was walking down the road, and I ran into one of my friends, and he tells me, "Hey, you know,
Hey, you know what? I would love to hear the rest of this story, but I have to say goodbye to my friends really quick. Is that okay?
oh yeah, go for it."
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. That's all the time we have for this week. Tune in next week when we'll be talking about the story of Hannah.
Hannah, like your baby Hannah? Are you gonna tell us a story about your baby named Hannah?
No, but good guess. I'm going to be talking about the story that me and Emily got the inspiration to name Hannah from in the Bible. That's right, there's a whole story in the Bible about a person named Hannah. Till then, this is Titus saying see you next week. Bye.
My soul finds rest in God alone. Salvation comes from Him. My hope is found in God alone, and we will trust in Him. In God we trust. In God we trust. In God we trust. In God we trust. For He is now my rock alone, my refuge and my song, a fortress found in God alone. For you, O Lord, are strong. In God we trust. In God we trust. In God we trust. In God we trust. God is strong and God is loving, teaching we have heard. By His guidance we are growing daily in His word. My soul finds rest in God alone. Salvation comes from Him. My hope is found in God alone, and we will trust in Him. In God we trust.
Good morning. We want to welcome each and every one of you to our worship services this morning here at the Gwinnett Church of Christ. Here for our loving family, living for God, and serving our neighbors. Again, I want to welcome you no matter where you're watching this from, whether you're local here in Gwinnett County or whether you're watching it from some other state. Either way, we want you to feel especially welcome here, especially if you're not a member of our church. I know we've got some visitors watching, and we just want you to know we are thrilled that you have chosen to worship with us this morning, and we hope that this is a good experience for you and that you feel God at work through this worship today. I want to point your attention to the fact that we have some children's lessons available on our gcc.org website. So if you'd like to share with your children a video lesson, you can do that this morning. Also, there's a couple of options for giving. If you'd like to support the work we're doing here at GCC, you can either mail in a check to the church building, we'll collect those here, or you can always give on our website under the tab marked for Give. At the end of our service this morning, one of our shepherds will pray over all of the prayer requests that have been submitted, so I hope you've had an opportunity to do that, and if not, continue to submit those through the week, and we will make sure that we are praying for you. Also, I would like for you to note that communion is coming. At the end of our sermon time this morning, I will lead us into a time as we gather around the Lord's table to share in communion. So now is a great time to gather those communion supplies and be ready for that. Also, just so you know, if something were to happen with the Zoom feed like it did a couple of weeks ago and our service was interrupted, you can always go to YouTube. Just search for the Gwinnett Church of Christ on YouTube and you can find this worship service that is available there, and you can always watch it that way. So now's a great time to gather your Bible, gather your family, and let us go before our God and King to worship Him today.
The splendor of a king, clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice, let all the earth rejoice. He wraps Himself in light, and darkness tries to hide. It trembles at His voice. It trembles at His voice. How great is our God! Sing with me, how great is our God! And all will see how great is our God. And age to age He stands, and time is in His hands, beginning and the end, beginning and the end. The Godhead three in one, Father, Spirit, Son, the Lion and the Lamb, the Lion and the Lamb. How great is our God! Sing with me, how great is our God! And all will see how great is our God. How great is our God! Sing with me, how great is our God! And all will see how great is our God. Who breaks the power of sin and darkness, whose love is mighty and so much stronger, the King of glory, the King above all kings, who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would bear my cross. You laid down your life. That I would be set free. takes the orphan, a son and daughter, the King of glory, the King above all kings, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would take my place. That you would bear my cross. That you would bear my cross. You lay down your life. You lay down your life. That I would be set free. That I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. This is amazing grace. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would take my place. That you would bear my cross. That you would bear my cross. You laid down your life. You laid down your life. That I would be set free. That I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Nearer, still nearer, close to thy heart. Draw me, my Savior, so precious thou art. Fold me, oh, fold me close to thy breast. Shelter me safe in that haven of rest. Shelter me safe in that haven of rest. Nearer, still nearer, while life shall last, till safe in glory my anchor is cast. Through endless ages ever to be. Nearer, my Savior, still nearer to thee. Nearer, my Savior, still nearer to thee.
Well, good morning. I pray that today finds you well. I know that many people are still experiencing pain for a variety of reasons, okay, but there are also several things going on that give me a great sense of hope. Okay, hope for our future, and I pray that you're feeling that as well. We have lots of reasons to be optimistic. Okay, for instance, last Wednesday, when the boys' last school assignment was turned in, Rachel's entire demeanor changed. We made it! Okay, there was a joy in her eyes that I haven't seen for a while. And I don't know about you, but I'm excited for our upcoming return, for at least some of us to be able to come back to our church building and worship together. Okay, I've missed that, right? I've missed you. Right? The thought that I could preach and teach with actual people instead of just teaching into a camera, that fills me with hope. Okay? And while I know that anything could happen tomorrow and it's not all sunshine and rainbows, I'm feeling optimistic that our best days are ahead of us. I'm excited about what the future holds for us here at GCC, and I hope you are too. Okay? And so I think it's extremely appropriate as we continue on in our sermon series on hope, that we study one of the most optimistic, one of the most hopeful passages in all of Scripture. And we're not going to read every verse of it, but look with me at one of the greatest pieces of literature ever composed. This is Isaiah chapter 40. Starting in verse 1. It says, "Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem, and proclaim to her that her hard service has been completed, that her sin has been paid for, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins." All right, Isaiah 40 comes right after Isaiah 39, which is a text talking about the exile, right? That 70-year period of time in which the people of God went off into Babylonian captivity, right? As you read those texts, you realize it was a terrible time. Okay? God cast us out of his presence because of our failure to keep the covenant. And for a long time, the people of God wondered if we could ever go back home. In Isaiah 40, finally, we turn the page. It declares, yes, it is time to put that exile behind us. It's time to go home. Comfort my people. Okay, notice verse 3. A voice of one calling. In the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. The rough ground shall become level, the rugged places a plain. And the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all the people will see it together. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Okay, here's the point. Number one, we live in hope because the way back to God is ready. Hey, notice the imagery here. Judah can feel the comfort of God because God has leveled out all the geography, leveled out all the terrain, so that the way back from Babylon to our home in the promised land is completely smooth. You remember the stories of how your parents had to walk uphill in the snow both ways to get to school? Okay, whatever the opposite of that is, that's how God has made the path for us home from exile. The way to God and to God's presence, okay, where we get to experience the glory of the Lord the way we were always supposed to. It is open. It is ready. It is time to go home. And hopefully, if you're a Christian, this is a familiar text to you. This text very famously gets quoted in the Gospels talking about Jesus coming. Okay, because what does Jesus do? He's removed every barrier that could possibly exist between us and God. Every valley's raised up, every mountain made low. So my sins kept me away from God. That was a barrier. And what does Jesus do? He conquered sin. He removes the barrier. Okay, that's the gospel story, how Jesus came and conquered sin and death so that I can have life. And you think about it, my own ethnicity was a barrier keeping me away from God. Right? I'm not Jewish. I have no ancestral claims to the people of God, to being a part of that covenant. Okay, so what does Jesus do? He removed that barrier. He opened the way for all of us Gentiles to be part of his glorious kingdom. Okay, and in God's kingdom, there's no superiority. Okay, I'm not less than because I'm not Jewish. Right? And we could easily preach a whole sermon on this. Okay, but quite simply, this is part of the reason why racism has absolutely no place in God's kingdom. As a Gentile, I should be on the receiving end of racism, right? I should be on the outside looking in. But by the grace of God, I have a seat at the Lord's table. So if I then turn around and look down on somebody because they're not physically or culturally like me, then I'm demonstrating I don't understand Jesus at all. I am here because Jesus lowered every mountain. He raised up every valley. He removed all of those barriers to make a way back to God for me. Because of that, you and I have a hope that can never be shaken. Verse 9. You who bring good news to Zion, go up on a high mountain. You who bring good news to Jerusalem, lift up your voice with a shout. Lift it up. Do not be afraid. Say to the towns of Judah, here is your God. See, the sovereign Lord comes with power, and he rules with a mighty arm. See, his reward is with him, and his recompense accompanies him. He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those that have young. Okay, here's number 2. We live in hope because we know who our God is. Right? And what I think is so cool about these couple of verses is that Isaiah puts 2 metaphors about God back to back that really don't seem to go together at all. Okay, in the first place, God is like a mighty warrior. He comes in power. His arms are stronger than the other guys. Okay, that's metaphor 1. And the metaphor 2 is God is a gentle shepherd. He's the one who lovingly carries the little baby lambs close to his heart. I like that. You know, my boys are little right now, and whenever they need strength, they come to me as their dad. Okay, they're still young enough they think I can do anything. They want me to lift things they can't lift, or reach things, or open things they can't open. Okay, but I love, usually, okay, that when they come to me for cuddles and snuggles, I love it. Okay, Sam came into our room the other morning. It was 5 a.m. and he wanted to snuggle, and I wasn't too happy about it then. Okay, but usually I'm happy about it. Okay, now I want to be the kind of dad who is strong for my kids and can shoo away monsters under the bed or fix whatever problems they have. Okay, but I also want to be the gentle kind of dad who tucks them in at night, right? I want to be a dad who's both strong and gentle. Okay, and however imperfectly I do that as a dad, God does that for us perfectly. You know, I know that some of you may find this hard to believe, okay, but my strength is limited. There will come more and more times as my boys get older that my strength and my abilities won't be able to solve their problems. Okay, my power can't fix everything for them. Okay, also, my gentleness is limited. Okay, my gentleness often fails because of my own fallenness and brokenness. Okay, I don't always act with love and mercy, right? My patience has limits. Okay, but you know what's awesome about God? His strength never fails. He will always be more powerful than any foe, any problem that we might ever face. Okay, and also, his love never fails. When I need his affection, even if it's 5 a.m., he's not annoyed by that. There's nothing that I can do that will ever make God love me less because God is love. And so here's my point for us this morning. Hey, if I really understand who God is, that he's both that mighty warrior and the gentle shepherd, then I can't help but live in hope. Okay, we have hope not because of who we are, but because of who God is. All right, number next. Okay, we live in hope because we refuse to trust in the wrong things. In this next section of Isaiah 40, verses 15 through 26, Isaiah goes through a bunch of stuff that we're tempted to trust in. Okay, and then he talks about how all of those things are woefully inadequate if we want real hope instead. Okay, we'll go through these quickly. Notice verse 15. He says, surely the nations are like a drop in a bucket. Okay, everyone living around 600 BCE, they thought that the empire destined to rule the world, the one that will surely be around for the next 1,000 years, would be Babylon. Okay, they were the most powerful empire the world had ever seen to that point. Okay, and so surely you should put your hope in a nation like Babylon. They'll be around forever. Okay, instead, the greatest empire the world had ever seen lasted less than 90 years as kings of the world. Okay, but maybe it'll be the Persians, right? They're the ones that conquered even the Babylonians. Maybe they're where we should put our hope. Okay, and that worked until Alexander the Great came and conquered the world. Okay, well, maybe it's the Greeks then. Maybe the Greeks, that's the empire. No, what about the Romans that came and conquered them? Okay, well, maybe the Roman Empire. Maybe that one will be around forever. Okay, but what happens to every major empire throughout world history? Okay, eventually it's going to fall. Now, I hope that the empire we're a part of, the American Empire, I hope it lasts for a whole lot longer because I think on balance it's really great and I don't want to be anything other than American. Okay, but is a nation a good place to put your hope? No. Okay, I would much rather put my hopes in God's kingdom because that's a kingdom that will endure forever. Okay, verse 18, notice the next one he says. He says, with whom then will you compare God? To what image will you liken him? Okay, the next thing Isaiah says is you shouldn't trust any idol, right? And really the next few verses in this are quite comical because he says that idols have a tendency to rust and rot and fall over if not attended to properly. Okay, and how stupid is it to worship and trust in something that can rust and rot and fall over? Don't trust in created things when the Creator is right here available to you. Okay, next one. Notice verse 21. He says, do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been told to you from the beginning? Have you not understood since the earth was founded? He sits enthroned above the circle of the earth, and its people are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy and spreads them out like a tent to live in. Okay, another thing that people in the ancient world were tempted to put their trust in was getting the right leader on the throne. Okay, surely, if we can just get the right king, then at least for the reign of that king, everything will be okay. And so they looked to these great leaders like Nebuchadnezzar or King Cyrus. Okay, these were some of the most powerful, some of the most mighty men to ever live. And surely, if you want someone to make things right for you, it would just be to get the right mighty ruler on the throne. We should put our hope in the right king. Okay, and Isaiah says, hey, as impressive as it might seem that some king rules over some empire, have you not heard that our God rules over the entire earth? Okay, do you not know that to our God, all of us are just like grasshoppers? Where do you really want to put your trust? All right, now, this point probably has no application for us, right? We would never be tempted to think, if only we could get the right person elected, then everything would be okay. Okay? We as nice, modern, enlightened people, we would never think that this next election is the biggest one ever and more important than every other election we've ever had. And so we need to pin all our hopes and dreams on getting the right people elected. Okay? We would never do that. But people in the ancient world who lived a long time ago, those people became obsessed with following the right politician. And Isaiah says, that's not a good plan. Okay, now, I firmly believe God can use the kings of this earth, and some are certainly better than others. But there's only one King of Kings. Okay, nowhere to put your hope. All right, number next. He says that we live in hope because God is our strength. Okay, and notice verses 28 through 31. I think this is a passage that every Christian should memorize. This is one of the most famous passages in the Old Testament, and it's famous for a reason. I cannot tell you how much I love this text. Notice starting in 28. He says, do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. I think this is one of the most famous passages in the Old Testament for a reason. Okay, because we all know what it's like to be tired and weary. We all know what it's like to have nothing left in the tank, and yet know that we've got to keep moving anyways. Okay, and if I realize that I don't have to have that strength in myself, that I don't have to lift myself up, that I can let God be my strength, that sounds appealing. Okay, so here's the thing. As you go throughout life, sometimes we will soar, right? Sometimes we'll run, and sometimes all we can do is walk. And there will be different seasons of your life in which you're able to move at different speeds. I know that right now, for many people, all that we can do is walk by stubbornly putting one foot in front of the other. Okay, and that's fine. The promise is that when we hope in the Lord, when we realize who our God is, we put our trust there, okay, then He will give us the strength to keep moving forward. I think for most of us, the last couple of months have been tough. We're walking through this one day at a time. And all we can do is keep relying on God to give us the strength that we need to make it through today. Okay, God can worry about tomorrow. I don't have to worry about that. All we can do is live with God's strength today. Okay, but I believe better days are ahead of us. And when we hope in the Lord, the promise is He will renew our strength. And so I look forward to hopefully seeing many of you here at church next Sunday. Okay, as we transition into a time of communion, I want to read from you a couple of verses that we skipped here in Isaiah 40 that I think are a great segue into a time where we commune around the Lord's table. Okay, notice what he says starting in verse 6. A voice says, "Cry out." And I said, "What shall I cry?" All people are like grass, and all their faithfulness is like the flowers of the field. The grass withers and the flowers fall, because the breath of the Lord blows on them. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of our God endures forever. Okay, in a passage of comfort, in a passage of hope, Isaiah reminds us that we enjoy salvation not because of our faithfulness, but because every word from God is true and God's word endures forever. Okay, it is God's faithfulness that ultimately counts because we couldn't be faithful. And so what we celebrate at communion every Sunday is that the faithfulness of Jesus in his life and his death and his resurrection conquered death and removed every barrier that existed between us and God. We gather now around the Lord's table, grateful for his faithfulness and celebrating that covenant relationship that we have with God and with each other. Let's go to him now in prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you this morning for your blessings and for the life that you've given to us. Father, I pray right now as we go into a time of communion that we would do this with you and with each other, that we would do this in a way that is encouraging and uplifting to us and is glorifying to you. Father, we just think right now about the life of Jesus, Father, the gospel story of how he came to this world and lived and died and rose again. And Lord, I pray that you would help that to continue to be our story, that we would live into that resurrection life, and that we would live in hope with you. Father, that we would allow you to be our strength and our shield, and that we would feel your presence as we commune with you now and as we go forth into the world. Father, I pray that we would just do a better job of representing you to a world that so desperately needs it. And Lord, that we would continue to look to you for that strength. God, bless us in this communion now. We pray all this in your Son's holy name. Amen.
When I survey